I'm just going to draw air as a box, even though we know it's not a box. But we're going to put the control room here and the organ here. And, Alan made a great recommendation to put the basses on either side of the room. So we split the basses. So these are the basses.
Do you know what the thinking behind was? To have the basses?
Yeah, so what it is, you have your tree here, right? All right, so left, right, and center. That's your tree. What I used to do was put the basses here. And what's cool about that is that you have the basses in the center. So you have, like pop music, you have basses in the middle. Okay. Whereas, I've never really understood why on a film score you would want a traditional orchestra layout, because with the basses on the right, it makes no sense to me, because obviously if you're recording Beethoven or you're recording a very symphonic score, maybe that's the way to go. But I used to like playing basses right here. The problem with that is there's nothing for them to bounce off of in terms of the early reflections. So what Alan recommended, let me get my eraser here. What Alan recommended is putting them on the side so they bounce off the wall. It was the coolest sound I've ever heard. And then the next big key was, normally your violins are up here, right?
Yeah.
And the problem with that is your principal is playing right into these microphones. So I remember always saying to my engineer to turn down the spot mics, and they would say, there are no spot mics. Because it sounded like, it made the tree sound like a spot mic. It was ridiculous to have one guy sitting right there, and it's almost like you hear a solo violin. So I put the violins back here. So this is violins 1 and violin 2. So I put them far away. And then these were the cellos. They were arranged around me on the podium there. And then we had the violas in a ring there. And so we really had 2 rows of violins like that. It was more like that. And I think there are 2 things going on here. I've always wanted a more low-end, bass-driven sound. And so this kind of helps achieve it, because the first thing you hear is the low end. But then also, instead of having the brighter violins right up on the tree, now they have time to kind of to marinate in the room a little bit before they hit the mics. So you're hearing this low-end sound first, and then these beautiful high strings coming onto that. And then we had the brass back here. We record the brass separately, which, it is what it is. We have to record in stems for the dub. I forgive my terrible handwriting. We had 12 horns, and then we had 2 tubas and 6 trombones back here, and then we had 4 trumpets. So that was our setup. That was our Robin Hood setup.
And would you have that set up again, or was it specifically for that score? You want it a bit darker? And
I'm never going to do this setup again, because my guys, we've already thought of like 3 ways to improve this, but we're also, every movie is different, Yeah. I think, every movie requires something new. For instance, in the movie Only the Brave, what we did, we had the room actually set up in the opposite, and we put, you have the galleries back here. We put, I think 24 violins in the galleries like that.
Wow.
And we actually had the tree like here. Sorry, now I'm just messing up this beautiful. So we had this really far away violin sound. So we had like the lower strings down here playing these really warm chords with a lot of harmonics and a lot of very distant violin melodies way back there. So, I think each film kind of calls for something very different. One other fun thing that I like doing is, instead of the antiphonal basses, is doing, if you are going to set up the violins in the front, is to set up, like this. And then it's very key, I think, to connect what happens in that room with what is happening in this room. Yeah. Because, for instance, if I set up the violins like that, I'm going to write in a different way. Mm-hmm. I'm going to tell my orchestrator about that, and she's going to orchestrate it in a different way and make sure that it's orchestrated in a way that works with the layout. So I think, look, we'll see how successful we are, but I'm always trying to, here's what's important, right? The dub is here. This is what's important to me. This is the movie dub. They're mixing down here. And this is, this is Joe. And I have no idea what I'm going to do, right? I'm wondering. I have no idea what I'm going to do. But I can start imagining what I want to hear at the dub set. I'm starting to imagine what I want to hear in the movie theater, right?
Yeah.
So all the decisions I make here, every little decision I make here, whatever that is going to influence my mock-ups, right? That's going to influence the mock-up and how I present it to the director. Once I start understanding what I'm writing, I'm starting to think about this, and that's going to influence how I mock up too and how I'm writing. I guess you're writing. And then finally, what starts to happen, and there are more steps here. You have recording, pre-records if you're recording drums or soloists.
Making your own sounds.
Making samples. All this is kind of over here. But the real goal I have is that this is related to this. So that requires that all these steps, including how we're laying out the recording room, is connected. And then Alan Meyerson was a huge part of this conversation, because I want him to get the best tracks he can, from Jake. And Jake is a world-class engineer. So I knew he was going to give Alan great tracks, but I wanted us to all be talking, to have, listening. They were listening to my mock-ups and trying to understand what I was going for. And I kind of pitched them this idea of, I wanted the violins in the back. And this is what we came up with. And then the dub. So
are you usually part of the mix as well?
I'm always going to the mix. In fact, sometimes I'm taking the sessions from Aaron, listening to them myself and moving the mics around and trying to understand what we have on tape I'm trying to understand what's available, so that I might ask Alan, say, hey Alan, I don't like, these mics as much, lean more on these mics, So obviously there are tons of steps, there are tons of variables, and I don't even know how we do what we do. It's a giant mystery every time we do it. But really, this is the most important thing. And I'm going to erase dub here because that doesn't even matter. What it is audience. It's the emotion. It's the / theater. It's what we want the people in the theater to feel. The problem that we have as composers is that there's so many places to screw up and to go wrong here, where if you don't have the right mix engineer, or if you don't have the right recording engineer, the right setup, or if you don't have the right soloist, or if you don't have the right samples, or if you don't have the right concept. There's every step of the way you could screw up here. The only way I keep myself on track is by keeping this in my head at all times, So I'm thinking, okay, what emotion does the audience want to experience? That's going to influence where I put the violins. That's going to influence where I put the tubas and the cellos. And so, all of this, and sorry I'm talking your head off here, but you can obviously tell I'm really excited by this, especially, as film composers, this is what the job used to be, right? This is what, here we go. Okay. There we go. I've written my magnum opus, and great, you go hang with the orchestra and it's fantastic. That is not the job anymore. Of course, that's this little component of the job right here. That's writing. The job is now this. Being there at the mix, understanding. I often say composers, we're producers, we're music producers, and we're movie producers in some ways. But in order to really control this outcome, or at least get close to what you had in your head, you have to have a firm understanding of all this, which is kind of daunting. But I love it. I love doing it because there are so many fun things to do. I don't just conduct. I also am at the mix, and I'm helping. I'm doing mock-ups, and I'm at sample sessions, I'm cutting samples, and every part of this job I find really interesting.
Amazing.
This actually ties back into templating. I think having one firm template might not be the best way to proceed, because then every project you do, whether it's a movie or a commercial or TV show, might sound the same. And obviously, on one hand, you want to have a style, you want to have a certain sound, but I think you're going to have a certain sound no matter what you do.
Because it's your taste a little bit. Now you kind of design your sounds how you like them.
So I often change my template I mean, I'd probably change my template a half dozen times a year, if not more, you know?
Annoying for your assistants, I'm guessing.
Sorry?
Annoying for your assistants, I'm guessing.
Exactly. So here we are. This is what it takes to be a composer.
Well, amazing, Joe. Thank you so much for the detailed insights and for having us in your studio.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being with me. Really appreciate it.